Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine.
The communist nations have exploited the turmoil of a time of transition in an effort to extend communist control into other areas of the world.
Thoughts on Dean Rusk and America's involvement in Vietnam? I know next to nothing about that.
Exactly. During President Joe Biden's last 20 days in office, his administration issued at least $1 billion in grants to hundreds of nonprofit groups scattered throughout the United States. A slice of that pie, $50 million, was awarded by the Department of Energy to a little-known charity in New Mexico called the Tribal Energy Consortium. The $50 million grant for a climate program under the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's signature 2022 spending law, is on paper an unbelievable windfall for the Tribal Energy Consortium. The charity posted just under $50,000 in revenue in both 2022 and 2023 IRS data show. But now, along with other Energy Department grants under Biden, the Trump administration is investigating the $50 million handout. The grant has not yet been dispersed to the awardee and could be cut, according to an official brief on the situation. That investigation will take into account how the TEC shares close ties to another tax-exempt organization and federal grantee with a history of financial mismanagement, the Washington Examiner's learned. The Department of Energy is conducting a department-wide review, which includes funding such as grants and loans, to ensure all activities are consistent with President Trump's executive orders and priorities, Ben Dieterich, a spokesman for the Energy Department, told the Washington Examiner on Monday. Damages public trust. Located in Chemes Pueblo, federally recognized Indian tribal land that is home to around 3,400 people, the TEC formed 2 years ago to advocate energy and mineral development. Its members include the Arizona-based Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company, Missouri River Resources, as well as tribes in Colorado, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and other states, according to the TEC's website. In June of last year, the Energy Department posted a funding opportunity online through its Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, with the tech taking home the $50 million award through a competitive process. The funding, which would be doled out for a one-year term, was awarded to the TEC to empower tribal communities to reduce methane emissions on tribal-owned and operated marginal conventional wells and at oil and gas facilities on tribal lands, federal records show. Biden's Inflation Reduction Act authorized the release of hundreds of millions of dollars to reduce methane emissions from the production and transport of coal, natural gas, and oil. However, nonprofit tax experts say it is crucial that the Trump administration conducts rigorous vetting of the $50 million grant before it disperses, particularly because of the TEC's ties to another grantee that faced scrutiny for financial mismanagement. The TEC, according to federal records, counts its principal officer as Roger Fragua. Fragua, a former Enron Corporation manager who works on tribal development projects, wears different hats. He is also the founder and executive director of the Flower Hill Institute, a Chemes Pueblo-based charity focused on climate change and agriculture-related initiatives. And according to financial disclosures, the Flower Hill Institute was found through an independent third-party audit mandated by the government in 2022 to have material weaknesses in internal controls. That's in part because Fragua's group did not test to see whether anyone besides a trio of companies tied to its board members fit the criteria to be contractors, the documents say. One of the paid companies, Coda Holdings, is a limited liability corporation led by Fragua. It reeled in $285,082 from the Flower Hill Institute in 2022 and was also listed as a contractor on the charity's 2023 tax forms. Coda Holdings shares an address in New Mexico with the Flower Hill Institute, as well as the TEC, the $50 million awardee public records show. According to tax experts, it's a clear conflict of interest for leaders of charities to selectively award contracts to their own companies. Fragua's Coda Holdings was paid as a contractor in 2022, though he was not paid as a board member, raising possible questions about its compliance with IRS rules. The IRS has strict rules concerning who may be considered independent contractors versus employees, with the distinction having notable tax implications for both employees and charities. A board member voting to end their own lucrative, multiple six-figure contract with the same charity they are responsible for overseeing seems unlikely, even if it would be in the charity's best interest for them to do so, said Lori Styron, the CEO of Charity Watch. Unless the consultants are offering some kind of incredible discount for services, and these services could not be reasonably obtained elsewhere from a disinterested provider. Charities really shouldn't engage in these kinds of contracts. Or it just looks bad, Styron told the Washington Examiner. It damages. Fragua did not respond to a request for comment. The other independent contractors tied to board members were also paid hundreds of thousands of dollars combined, tax forms show. But apparent self-dealing isn't the only issue outlined in the audit for the group linked to the TEC, whose website is ndnenergy.org, a domain corresponding to a since-dissolved LLC that counted Fragua as its president. The Flower Hill Institute also overbilled the Department of Agriculture, an agency that awarded it more than $10 million in 2022, the audit document said. Flower Hill has been billing the U.S. Department of Agriculture 100% of its annual expenses in equal monthly amounts whether the total amount billed was expensed or not, the charity said in documents filed with the IRS. The Department of Agriculture told the Washington Examiner it reviewed a corrective actions plan by the Flower Hill Institute to address its management issues. USDA required that the Flower Hill Institute provide a reconciliation timeline for the overpayment of $186,089 under a budget line item for communications and grants technical manager, said a USDA spokesperson, noting that the charity reconciled the overpayment. The taxpayer-backed Flower Hill Institute was found through the audit to be out of compliance with federal requirements when entering into procurement contracts, as well as not meeting suspension and debarment requirements by potentially contracting with a suspended or debarred vendor. Patrick Sternal, an attorney and former tax law specialist at the IRS, agreed that the Flower Hill Institute's contractor payments give the appearance of self-dealing and raise important conflict of interest questions. As a whole, given the audit's findings and the group's ties to the TEC awardee, it is pivotal that the Energy Department investigate the $50 million handout to ensure internal controls are in place to avoid possible mismanagement, Sternal said. If they're savvy, they would follow up and confirm and make sure the funds will be used for what they've been given for, Sternal said. The Flower Hill Institute and the TEC did not respond to requests for comment.
The EPA's incredible $20 billion dollar caper explained. A chance leak about a last-minute financial agent agreement at the Environmental Protection Agency is the latest evidence that our government is a lot more corrupt than even cynics guessed. By Matt Taibbi. The EPA's new chief Lee Zeldin dropped a bomb on social media Wednesday evening. Roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. It's a true, crazy, obscene story. It started with a repulsive Beltway candid camera scene posted last December 3rd by off-malign Project Veritas. In it, an EPA special assistant named Brent Efron dressed in smart glasses and guzzling a tangerine-colored cocktail gushed. I do implementation. I do how do you spend $100 billion? He added he worked on climate change things, boasting that in the last year, we've spent like $50 billion, billion with AB. But with Trump coming, we're just trying to get the money out as fast as we can before they come in, and stop it all. We're on like the Titanic, throwing gold bars off the edge. 2 weeks ago, on January 29th, the Senate confirmed Zeldin, a former Republican congressman from New York. Less than 2 weeks into his tenure, on Monday, Zeldin posted a response to the Project Veritas video, saying, I've directed the EPA to put on their scuba gear and help me find the gold bars. Almost immediately, staff found them. Outgoing Biden staffers drafted a pair of agreements in August and September, clearing the way for the last-minute transfer of $20 billion out of government to an authorized financial agent, Citibank. Once money goes out the door, it's considered expended legally, achieving Efron's stated end of making it harder for the new administration to stop it all.
As fast as possible before they come in and stop it. It truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing gold bars off the top edge.
Who are the gold bars going to?
Nonprofits, states, tribes. We gave them the money because it was harder. If it was a government-run program, they could take the money away. If Trump won, and because it was a external policy against Trump winning. Until the Trump people come in and tell us we can no longer give out money. I do environmental, climate policy things.
Really?
Yeah.
It's amazing. Is that here? That stuff is here?
I mean, because I do federal government climate things. Well, I have been doing that. But that might change. But
Why?
so look at the EPA. So a lot is going to change.
Amazing.
So I do, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay, Biden's climate law.
Yes.
Yeah. So I do IRA implementation. I work with Biden appointees. The money that we've given out tens of billions of dollars. Over the last year. Over the last year, we've given out probably $60 billion.
$50 million?
Billion with a B.
$50 billion.
Yes, for climate things. So to go work for one of these places, I think would be really cool.
What are the places that you've given them to?
It's only been a few weeks, so it's a little early. But green banks. So they're nonprofit institutions that are making it more financially feasible to build renewables, to do climate projects. I do implementation now. So I do how do you spend $100 billion? How do you make sure that they're the proper, well, until recently, how do you make sure the proper processes are in place to prevent fraud and to prevent abuse and to ensure that we are funding good paying jobs and that sort of stuff. Now it's just how to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and stop.
Really?
Yeah.
You can do that?
Yeah. To an extent, just within reason. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Why not? Because if it's not gonna...
Basically, that's where it all is now. I mean, now it all is it truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing gold bars off the top edge.
Does it really? You kind of feel weird.
It's weird. I mean, it's weird. It's not good vibes. It's not good. I mean, everyone's very sad.
Who are the gold bars going to?
Nonprofits, states, tribes, cities. Yeah.
Anything in the news that I would know of?
Not yet.
Any organization,
well, they're all local. A lot of them are small, not local nonprofits. This is a big thing that most of the stuff we funded, but the thing that we haven't funded yet are the local nonprofit program that was going to be a winter Kamala Harris administration program. So now we're just getting it as quick as possible.
right? Yeah. It's going to tune at $50 billion.
No, it's like 2 billion at this point. But yeah, we've got most of it, like 90% is out. But
Wow. And what happens if they try to stop it? They can't?
when they come in, if you haven't gotten out the door, then they can stop it.
Yeah, like 2 months. If they don't get it out by a certain date, what's that date?
It's the inauguration, the 20th. It's renewed on the 20th of January. Yeah.
So you can work right down to the minute.
It's probably like a little afternoon, but yeah, it's basically new. Yeah.
Hey, throw a couple billion here and there.
It's until the Trump people come in and tell us we can no longer give out money.
Wow.
So that's at the very earliest, it's noon on the 20th, and it's probably a little bit after because they have to get in the building and tell people what to do.
Will they come in and stop?
Yeah, like I think they will. I think they will come in and they will issue an order that like all grants have to stop. EPA can't give any money out until we reevaluate anything, and then they'll say we're reevaluating it, and then Congress will say we're stopping this entirely, and they'll pass a law that says all this money doesn't exist anymore that you wanted to give out. No, I think we gave them the money because it was harder. If it was a government-run program, they could take the money away.
No.
If Trump won, and because it was a exterrence policy against Trump winning. So like these are basically like nonprofit institutions that will cover the entire country. They could have been a government agency, but because they aren't, they're safer from Republicans taking the money away.
You guys are like saving the world, literally.
I don't know if we are, but like we're throwing gold bars up at Titanic. Yeah.
You're doing what?
We're throwing gold bars off the Titanic. That's all we can say. We're doing. I don't know if we're saving it, but we're getting the money out.
Financial agent agreements have been around since the 1860s. They allow federal agencies to offload financial management, wires, debits, and other processes, usually to a depository institution. Former Biden EPA official Zeeland, Hoover therefore wasn't wrong to tell the Washington Post, whose story on this later becomes part of this scandal, that it's standard for the Treasury to strike such agreements with banks. However, this was the first such agreement in the EPA's history, and there is no precedent for moving such an enormous sum out of government specifically to get it away from the oversight of an incoming administration. It was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight, is how Zeldin put it. Defenders of the previous administration will argue, as they have successfully with the grant freezes, that the new administration does not have authority to pause congressionally appropriated funding. But it's one thing to argue that Trump can't stop payments, and another for lame duck officials to rush $20 billion off the government's books before Trump even takes office, just to make sure every dime gets spent. And that's before we get to the key question: spent on what? These billions earmarked for climate change things were appropriated as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. More specifically, it's money for 8 huge greenhouse gas reduction fund grants announced last summer, 3 being part of the $14 billion National Clean Investment Fund, and 5 going to the hilariously titled $6 billion Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. Obviously, clean energy is an emerging universe, but these grants look like the absolute cutting edge of back-of-napkin budgeteering, far exceeding in sheer balls even the $50 billion for the next generation, whatever weapon. That'll be awesome once we figure out how to build it, awards that traditionally go to military contractors like Lockheed or Boeing. Take the Climate United Fund, which is due to get a $7 billion chunk of this cash. This is a national coalition of nonprofits that has no award history. Basically, it's a website with a handful of clip art photos, cheap clip art, that went up in September, advertising an intent to distribute to partners with histories. The illusion of a past is implied in lines like, for decades, each Climate United coalition partner has raised and managed billions of dollars to drive economic opportunity, even as you learn that Climate United itself was formed for this program. It is a separate legal entity, but part of a known nonprofit, Calvert Impact. $7 billion is a lot of money to allocate to unspecified clean energy projects under a rubric of lending to community lenders. It may be that the idea of investing in clean energy isn't a bad one, but these funds look like a promise to spend billions on ideas not yet conceived or even pitched yet, in a year in which, lest one forget, FEMA ran out of money during hurricane season. Reuters tried to put a brave face on the concept, but the best it could come up with was the program's aim was to kickstart projects over the next 7 years to reduce or avoid up to 40 million metric tons of climate pollution annually. That is vague on vague with a side of vague. Let's stipulate that all of this is not as bad as it looks, that there is a real network of real green energy partners and communities all over the country who are waiting to do crackerjack work. If that's the case, then Washington media just defamed the enterprise, covering it with a stench of seeming corruption with bizarre deceptions in response to Zeldin's video. The Washington Post quickly came out with EPA chief says Biden was irresponsibly shoveling boatloads of cash, vows to get back $20 billion, saying, the Environmental Protection Agency will try to claw back $20 billion that the Biden administration approved for climate projects, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said in a social media post Wednesday, claiming without evidence that the money was awarded in a rush job with reduced oversight. The without evidence trope began to be introduced in news stories about Trump as far back as 2016, but really became standard with the 2020 election claims stories. I don't particularly love the practice of plastering Trump-related material with rhetorical Surgeon General's warnings, but it's not way out of bounds if the claims are, actually, without evidence. But the Post told on itself in the article, writing, though he did not mention the bank by name, Citi had an agreement with the Biden administration to oversee the release of $20 billion under the program to nonprofit groups and states, according to publicly available documents. The paper couldn't help itself. It knew unreported details of the deal before it even called for comment, reported them, then implied the story was invented. This is almost as big a show of huevos as putting up a half-assed website just before election as a landing spot for $20 billion taxpayer dollars. The public is about to fund out the depth of a long worsening problem. Outlets like the Washington Post, New York Times, and Politico are so far up the asses of certain agencies, the EPA very much being one, that their copy reads like the previous administration's press releases. You will read one story after another about the EPA with the same tone. Trump is trying to stop money for clean air and energy efficiency because meanness. The administration continues its attacks on working-class communities, rural and urban families, is how Katie Chavez of the Climate Justice Alliance put it for the Post. Also, the Post made sure to include this one. Project Veritas has been known to use false cover stories. So beware, even though, as Zeldin noted, they themselves use the same Project Veritas quotes. You could tweak a few things and have this not look so bad, but they don't even bother. I'm frequently asked if my past covering undisguised corruption in the Yeltsin and Putin governments prepared me for covering American politics. Usually I say yes before making a semi-abstract comparison, like noting mid-90s subsidized privatizations for Yeltsin cronies had similarities to the Fed facilities set up to swallow up toxic assets of big Wall Street donors. In this case the comparison is exact, the only difference being the American version of the scheme is far bigger. Way back in 1992, Prime Minister Yager Gaidar created authorized banks to distribute government money. As with our system, this was sometimes necessary because the Russian treasury lacked the logistical chops to handle certain new tasks. However, over time, some of these authorized banks became places to move money away from the country's few oversight mechanisms, like the Shayatnaya Palata accounting chamber. In some cases, legally obligated funds went to accounts of actors who soon after made successful bids on auctioned industrial properties. In other cases, money earmarked for, say, Chechen reconstruction would be discovered much later to have been embezzled. I thought this was a marvel of chutzpah at the time, but the latter story's worst episode was over just $46 million. Here there's no indication at all that the bank is the bad actor, but the concept of moving federal money away from federal accounting is the same. It's just exponentially bigger in scope. I get the controversy over the means of the incoming administration's cuts. But even I'm shocked at how bottomless the waste problem appears to be, and how valiantly the entire machinery of Washington is rallying to the cause of budget horseshit. These are wild stories. Hold on tight.